like metallic rain falling on a city of neon dreams. Our stories are both beautiful and piercingly cold to the touch. Experience the raw intensity of urban drama through a unique and cinematic lens of high-tech art. Click subscribe now and feel every drop of the narrative.
I was never the one people noticed when they walked into a room. Not the funny one, not the loud one. I was the one who showed up early to help set the table and stayed late to do the dishes. The one who drove 2 hours on a Tuesday because someone needed a ride. The one who quietly slid my credit card across the counter and said, "I've got it," so many times that nobody even looked up anymore. My name is not important. What I was to my family, that's what matters here. I was the fixer, the financier, the one with a real job and therefore a real obligation to help. I was 28 when this started, 29 when it ended, and somewhere in that year I learned more about the people I'd spent my entire life loving than I ever wanted to know. My younger sister, I'll call her by what she was to me, not by her name, had been planning her wedding for what felt like the entire time she'd been alive. From the moment her boyfriend proposed at the restaurant she made him book 3 weeks in advance, she was already talking centerpieces, color palettes, a venue with chandeliers. She had a spreadsheet, she had a Pinterest board with over 400 pins. She had a vision, and she was very clear about one thing. The vision was expensive. What she did not have was money. She had a part-time job she described as transitional that had been transitioning for going on 2.5 years. Her fiancé worked in sales and made decent commission, but spent most of it on the truck he drove and the apartment they shared. Between the two of them, they could cover the small stuff. The favors, maybe. The guest book. Everything else fell to me. It didn't happen in one conversation. It never does with family. It happened the way all financial agreements with relatives happen. Sideways, in increments, never written down, always framed as temporary. It started with, "Could you just spot us the venue deposit while we figure out the rest?" And over 6 months became, I had paid the venue deposit, the full catering retainer, the photographer's booking fee, the florist contract, the string quartet for the ceremony, and the hotel room block for out-of-town guests. My sister had a wedding planner, not a day of coordinator, a full wedding planner, and I had paid her first 2 invoices as well. Every time I handed over a check or sent a wire transfer, my sister hugged me and said she didn't know what she'd do without me. Every time I believed her. I thought that's what love looked like, showing up when it counted. I thought I was being a good sister. I thought, when the time came, she would do the same for me. I was not asked to be a bridesmaid. I told myself it was fine. She had 6 friends she'd known since college, and I understood. Bridesmaid photos are forever, and there's a logic to wanting the people closest to you every day in those pictures. I told myself I would be in the audience with our parents, proud and smiling, watching the wedding I had largely funded become real. That was before the text. It was a Wednesday. I was at work, in the middle of reviewing a contract that needed to go back to a client before 5. My phone buzzed on my desk, and I glanced at it the way you do when you're busy. A quick scan, one eye still on the screen in front of me. It was from my sister. "Hey, so this is awkward to say, but I think it's better I just tell you directly. We've decided to keep the ceremony really intimate, immediate family and close friends only. Like people who have been part of our lives in a more present way. I hope you understand. You're still invited to the reception, obviously." I read it 3 times. I set my phone face down on my desk. I stared at the contract in front of me and did not read a single word of it for the next 4 minutes. I know it was 4 minutes because I watched the clock. I was waiting to feel something. Anger came eventually, a slow, rising thing, not a flash. But first, there was just the strange, hollow quiet of understanding something you didn't want to understand. Not present enough. I had paid her florist. I had paid the string quartet. I had driven to her apartment the previous month to help her address invitation envelopes, because the wedding planner had suggested handwritten addresses and my sister's handwriting was, in her words, a disaster. I had sat at her kitchen table for 4 hours writing out 212 names and addresses in my best penmanship while she sat across from me eating cereal and reading out names from the list. Not present enough. I picked up my phone and typed 2 words. "Okay, understood." Then I opened a new browser window and started looking up cancellation policies. The venue contract was ironclad. There was a window for cancellations that had closed 8 weeks prior. But I had paid the deposit directly, and I had the receipts. The catering company was different. I had a contract, and when I called that afternoon, a very professional woman named no one I'll mention told me that cancellations made more than 30 days before the event received a partial refund, 60% of the retainer. I took it. The photographer was a friend of a friend, and when I explained the situation, she was uncomfortable but ultimately understood. She had not yet turned down other bookings for the date. She released the contract. I got a full refund. The florist was harder. The florist had already sourced specialty flowers. My sister had wanted garden roses in a very specific blush peach that required advance ordering. When I called, there was a long pause on the other end, and then the florist said she would need to check with her supplier. She called back an hour later. She could resell the flowers with some effort. She returned 70%. The string quartet had a standard policy, no refund within 60 days. I lost that one. I made peace with it. The hotel room block was easiest. Those hadn't been charged yet, just held. I called the hotel, explained I needed to release the block, and they removed my credit card from the reservation with no charge. The wedding planner was the last call I made. She was businesslike about it, which I appreciated. She had invoiced for 2 months of work and had been paid for 2 months of work. We were square. She said she was sorry to hear it hadn't worked out. I thanked her and hung up. By the time I closed my laptop that night, I had recovered just over $11,000 out of the roughly $19,000 I had spent or committed. It was not everything, but it was something. I did not tell my sister any of this. She didn't ask. For 2 weeks, we exchanged exactly 4 text messages, all surface level, all from her side, all cheerful in the way people are cheerful when they're trying not to acknowledge something. Can you believe it's only 6 weeks away with 3 exclamation points? The dress alterations came in perfect. I responded with short, warm replies because I was not yet ready to say out loud what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, who is paying for all of this now? Because the catering retainer I had pulled was substantial. The photographer was gone. The florist was partially pulled. The hotel block was released. Someone had to be making up those gaps, and it wasn't my sister's part-time transitional job. I found out from my cousin, not through family gossip exactly, but through the specific kind of casualness people use when they assume you already know. She mentioned, offhand, that our aunt and uncle had stepped in to help out with some of the wedding expenses, and wasn't it nice that everything was still coming together? She said it like I was part of the story. I said something neutral and changed the subject. So that was how it worked. I was out. The money I had spent had bought my way into a role that was then revoked, and the new money, other family money, had replaced mine, and everything continued as planned, and I was an optional guest at the reception. I want to be honest about something. I almost let it go. I am, by nature, someone who avoids confrontation. I had spent most of my life being the person who smoothed things over, who said it's fine when it wasn't, who convinced herself that keeping the peace was the same as being at peace. I had a whole internal speech prepared. She's under stress. Weddings make people act strange. After it's over, we'll have a real conversation. I was ready to fold the whole thing into the category of things I let go for the sake of the relationship. Then my mother called. She called on a Sunday, which is when she calls. We talked for 20 minutes about ordinary things, her book club, the weather, a neighbor's new dog. Then, near the end, she said, "Your sister mentioned you've been a little distant lately. She's worried you're upset about the wedding." I said, "Did she tell you why I might be upset?" My mother paused. She said you two had a disagreement about the guest list. A disagreement about the guest list. A disagreement about the guest list. A text telling me I wasn't present enough after 6 months of payments and 4 hours of handwritten envelopes had been translated through the telephone of my family's communications into a disagreement about the guest list. I said, "I see." My mother said, "She really wants you there, sweetheart, at the reception. She said it's important to her." I thought about the string quartet I had fully lost, the blush peach roses I had partially lost, the $19,000, the invoices, the wire transfers, the Wednesday afternoon I spent on hold with the catering company. I thought about not present enough. I said, "I'll think about it." I did think about it. I thought about it for 3 days, and on the 3rd day I remembered something. 4 months before the wedding, back when I was still writing out envelope addresses and considered part of the inner circle, my sister had asked me to keep something for her. She'd been out with her friends, and someone had handed her a phone to watch a video, and then someone had taken a photo, and then there was a whole sequence of events that ended with my sister sending me a video file and saying, "Just hold on to this, don't ask. I'll explain later." She'd said it with the specific, uncomfortable energy of someone who has just witnessed something they don't know what to do with. She never explained later. I had the video on my phone for 4 months and never watched it. I want to be clear about that. I am not someone who goes digging through other people's private information. I hadn't opened it. I put it in a folder and forgotten about it. But on the third day of thinking about my mother's phone call, I opened it. It was a video someone had taken on a phone, probably without meaning to capture what it captured. Grainy, slightly off angle, the kind of footage that exists because someone hit record by accident or was pointing the camera somewhere else. It showed my sister's fiancé and a woman I did not recognize. I will not describe it in detail. I will only say that what they were doing would have been very upsetting to my sister if she had seen it. I sat with my phone in my hands for a long time. This was the thing I had been carrying without knowing I was carrying it. This was the reason my sister had been weird that week. The reason she'd asked me to just hold on to it with no explanation. She knew. She had known for months, and she had decided to get married anyway. And somewhere in that calculation, she had decided I was expendable. I want to be careful about how I explain what I did next, because I know how it looks. I know that the most defensible version of this story, the version that makes me unambiguously right, would involve a private conversation, a quiet warning, a chance for her fiancé to know what he was walking into. I know that's the cleaner ending. But I had spent 6 months being the person who showed up quietly, the person who handled things privately and was thanked and then sidelined, the person who was not present enough, even when I was literally the only one with my credit card in the system. I was tired of private. I sent the video to every address in the wedding invitation list I still had on my phone, the same list I had spent 4 hours helping to write out by hand. I sent it 45 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. I was not at the venue. I was at a coffee shop across town, hands around a cup of something I don't remember ordering, watching the timestamp tick forward. My phone was silent for a while, then it was not. My sister called first. I did not answer. Her fiancé called. I didn't have his number saved, but I recognized it from the catering contract confirmations he'd been CC'd on. I did not answer. My mother called. I did not answer. My cousin texted. She was already at the venue, and the text said only, "What is happening?" I did not answer that either. What I found out later through the cousin who was there and told me everything was this: the ceremony had been delayed because the groom had stopped responding to the wedding coordinator. He had been in the parking lot. His best man had gone to find him. Someone in the guest seating had started a low, whispered conversation that spread row by row. My sister, in the bridal suite, had been told there was a brief delay. She had her phone. She had already seen the messages. The ceremony happened. I want to be honest about that too. I did not prevent a wedding. They stood at the altar. The officiant spoke, but the groom, at some point, said something in a voice low enough that only my sister heard it, and she answered in 2 words, and the officiant, who had not been briefed on any of this, kept going because that is what officiants do when they are not sure what else to do. What I was told, and I only have secondhand information, is that the reception did not happen. The guests were asked to leave the venue by 7 in the evening. The photographer posted nothing. The wedding planner, who had been rehired after I pulled out, apparently left without being paid for her day of services. My sister called me 17 times over the next 2 days. On the 3rd day, she stopped calling and sent a text instead. The text was long. I read it twice and then I deleted it without responding. My mother called again. This time the conversation was different. There was crying and there were words I won't repeat here, and there were accusations. I listened. I did not apologize. At the end, I said one thing. You knew he had been with someone else. You asked me to keep a video of it. You knew, and you chose to marry him anyway, and then you decided I wasn't real family anymore. I just agreed with you. She had no answer to that. That was 8 months ago. I have not spoken to my sister since. My relationship with my parents is, I don't have a clean word for it, strained. We exchange birthday messages. I went home for a weekend in the fall and we were all very careful with each other, like people navigating a house where something fragile had broken and no one had swept up all the pieces yet. There are things I miss. I miss the version of my sister who used to call me when she was scared, before she learned it was easier to call me when she needed money. I miss the idea of the relationship I thought we had, the beach trips and the inside jokes, and the years of believing that when something difficult came, we would be on the same side of it. I miss being someone's person. I don't miss the invoices. I don't miss the "I'll pay you back" that never came. I don't miss sitting at her kitchen table writing addresses for a wedding she'd already decided I was optional to attend. People ask me sometimes, the few people who know the whole story, whether I regret it, whether I wish I'd done it differently. Warned him privately. Said something sooner. Found a cleaner way. I think about that. I think about it more than I probably should. And here's where I land. I should have said something when she handed me that video. I should have looked at it then and asked her what she wanted to do and had the conversation that we both avoided for 4 months. That was the moment where I could have changed the shape of what happened. But I don't regret stopping the payments. I don't regret pulling back from a relationship where my value was measured in what I could cover and my presence was optional. I don't regret the conversation with my mother where I finally said out loud what had been true for a long time. You cannot fund someone's life and be considered a guest in it. That's not family. That's not even friendship. That's something else. Something with no good name. Something that feels like love and functions like something different. I am still learning to tell the difference. I am still learning that showing up, really showing up, the kind that costs something, is worth doing only when it's received as what it is, not as a resource, not as a given, as an act of love from a person who chose to be there. When it stops being that, you're allowed to stop. I am still learning that too. I've thought a lot about what it means to confuse generosity with belonging. For a long time, I didn't know the difference. I thought if I showed up, with my checkbook, with my time, with my handwriting on 212 envelopes, that meant I was in. That meant I was chosen. That meant when something hard came, there would be someone on my side of it. What I understand now is that I was not buying belonging. I was renting the appearance of it, month by month, invoice by invoice, and I didn't know that was the arrangement until the lease was revoked. My sister made a choice, not one choice, a long series of them, each one small enough to explain away on its own. She chose to take the money. She chose to let me believe it meant something. She chose to keep a secret that I ended up keeping for her without knowing what I was holding. And then she chose to send a text that told me, plainly, that I was optional. Every choice had a consequence, and the consequences stacked up into something neither of us could pretend away. I made choices too. I chose to write the checks without asking for anything in return, which felt like love and was also, if I'm being clear-eyed about it, a way of avoiding a harder conversation. The harder conversation was, do you actually see me, or do you see what I can do for you? I didn't ask that. I kept showing up instead, as if the showing up would eventually answer it for me. It did, just not the way I hoped. There's a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with what you know and everything to do with what you're willing to see. I was not stupid. I was unwilling. There's a difference, and the distinction matters because stupidity can't be helped and unwillingness can. At some point, the information was there. I just kept filing it under "give it more time" instead of under "pay attention." The resilience I had to find wasn't the dramatic kind. It wasn't walking away in one clean moment. It was the quieter, harder thing, deciding on a Wednesday afternoon in a regular office to stop paying for a version of family that wasn't real, and then making 11 phone calls, and then not answering 17, and then sitting across from my mother and saying, calmly, what had been true for a long time. That is not a cinematic kind of strength. It's the ordinary kind, which is the only kind that actually holds. What I want anyone to take from this, if there's anything worth taking, is that the people in your life will show you exactly how they see you, if you're willing to look at what they do rather than what they say. My sister said she didn't know what she'd do without me. Then she showed me, very clearly, that she had a plan. Both of those things were true at the same time. That's not a contradiction. That's just what happens when someone's words and their actions have been separated for long enough. You're allowed to stop funding a relationship that wouldn't survive without your money. You're allowed to stop being the most present person in a room you were told you don't belong in. You're allowed to say, okay, understood, and mean it completely. Not as a surrender, but as clarity. I am still learning that clarity offered to yourself is one of the most honest things you can do. It doesn't always feel like strength when you're in it. Sometimes it just feels like sitting alone in a coffee shop watching the clock. But it's there. It holds. and it belongs only to you, no invoice required.